Bättre? Ja, nu funkar det. Ja, då börjar vi med det här seminariet. Vårt sista seminariet innan matchen sätter igång. Det är, mitt namn är Cornelis Uittenbogaard, jobbar på Stiftelsen Tryggare Sverige som forskare och stadsplanerare, och det är jag som har fått uppdraget att moderera det här seminariet nu. Det är alltid något spännande som händer här i Almedalen. Så det här seminariet handlar om placemaking, vilket är ett koncept som har kommit till Europa och till Sverige från USA. Och vi tänkte bara gräva lite i vad det här egentligen innebär som ett koncept och hur man kan tillämpa det. Och vi börjar då med perspektivet från USA och inte minst från Project for Public Spaces. Och då har vi då Ethan Kent här, och sen går vi vidare, och jag kan ta fram vår listan. Bjuder också upp våra svenska aktörer som jobbar med det här konceptet och försöker fråga ut lite. Ja, men hur funkar det egentligen här i Sverige? Och då har vi då först här Viktoria Walldin från arkitekter. Vi har Kristina Cedrins från Fastigheter och Linda Sanderson från arkitektur. Och sen har vi Tigran Haas som kommer in med ett litet forskarperspektiv på slutet. Nu är det så att det här seminariet kommer att hållas helt och hållet på engelska, så nu byter jag till engelska. För det handlar ju om det här internationella konceptet och modellen, så det är lite enklare att snacka på engelska om det. So now we change to English totally until we end this seminar, until the match starts. So yeah, we will start with your focus from the international perspective and how it all started up in the US and how you are working right now with it still. And then we bring up our Swedish actors and try to implement it in Sweden, so to say. So you're welcome to put on your presentation. You will have about 20 minutes to show what you got. So you can introduce yourself.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Exciting for me to get to be part of this. Just a couple words about the Safer Sweden. They've been a good partner of ours. We've gotten to learn a lot from them coming to New York on their study tours, and we've worked with KTH and Axel Johnson Foundation in Sweden. I've come to Sweden about once a year for the last dozen years, and looking to sort of build this placemaking conversation here to actually apply on the ground. Safety, the convergence of placemaking and safety is a really exciting one for us. It's how we first really came to our work in the 70s and 80s. In the States, safety was the big issue in cities. And then our work really grew internationally in the last 10 years, especially working with UN Habitat with their Safer Cities program. Again, applying placemaking as a proactive way to dealing with safety issues, both through the design of public space, but even more importantly, through the process of how people are engaged and through the management and programming of spaces, how we're able to achieve safety outcomes often more quickly, affordably, and inclusively than just through design or just through policing alone. So we really, we were put into practice. Project for Public Spaces was put into practice to apply the work of a man by the name of William White, who wrote a book called The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. And he was one of the first people to sort of identify the problem of sprawl and sort of the breakdown of community in suburban landscapes. And he really traced this issue back to how we design cities at the human scale. And he said, what attracts people most, it would appear, is other people. He also said, it's difficult to design a space that will not attract people. What is remarkable is how often this has been accomplished. And the different approaches to shaping cities right now we think are creating places that are not very safe and not really attracting people. And if you Google the future of cities, Peter Elmland of the Axel Johnson Foundation actually first pointed this out to us, that if you Google the future of cities, many of the images that come up, almost all of them look a lot like this. And this may be perceived as a futuristic or a green or sort of technocentric city, but we don't think this is one that's going to be very friendly, very comfortable, very safe, very innovative. or very inclusive. This is sort of late stage innovation. This is what many different cities are. If you extrapolate out the small things that they're doing that are often perceived as new and exciting, this is what's being built, and it's a very static, very expensive, very sclerotic type of environment that can't really be changed very much. And if you look, especially in Asia, people are developing this. The American architects are being hired, and the centers of cities look like this. And these are not creating places that are very safe, that are from a crime perspective or a vehicular perspective especially. So we shape our public spaces thereafter. Our public spaces shape us. We don't realize the extent to which we're shaped by them, and we are shaping them. And so we see placemaking as really a questioning and a sort of turning upside down of how we all participate in shaping our public realm, our built environment. And yet we copy the form of spaces. This is Boston City Hall Plaza 40 years ago. It copied the form of Piazza del Campo in Siena. But we don't copy the life, the management, the process, again, of how these spaces are shaped. So we've gone through an era where design alone is perceived as the solution, and we're causing a lot of the major problems we're finding in cities because of it. This is the Guggenheim Bilbao, and that many of you are probably familiar with, sort of ushered in an era where the thought was if we just spend a lot of money on a fancy architect and a fancy building, we'll solve our urban problems. I got to go here on my honeymoon briefly and see it. Beautiful building. But I learned later that Frank Gehry said I do not do context. And indeed, many people in the city that I've talked to said that they felt the building actually pushed the context away. It was about itself, not about the culture or community that's there. And it's hard to find the entrance. It's not welcoming to people around it. These people were walking up the stairs, sort of exhausted halfway up from stepping on the same foot each time. You feel smaller and smaller as you go down into the space. We decided not to go in. We felt so unwelcome. And we decided, well, we thought if you go to the waterfront side, it would be welcoming and fun and safer. But this is what we found. And I took this picture to illustrate this quote that William White said, that he said that blank walls proclaim the power of the institution, if not the inconsequence of the individual for whom they are clearly meant to put down, if not intimidate. And moments after I took this picture, these two men mugged the tourist couple that had come up the stairs of their camera. And I told some police that happened, and they said, the police said that happens here all the time. So this space is designed to support that pattern of activity, that kind of fear. It would be cheaper and obviously create a much better place for this to be safer. Actually, for this to be, if there was a cafe here with some transparency, this would be one of the safer places in Bilbao, one of the nicest places to be. But because it has to be about the building, about the design. And so everyone around the building is admiring it, they love it, they're taking pictures, but they're consuming the environment. As you go away from the building, you see people start to connect with each other again, to start to show affection and comfort and be relaxed and feel safe again. Comfort, it really is safety is key to good public spaces. It's when people start to feel comfortable. And so we see, but comfort perhaps is even a more fundamental goal to bring out many outcomes in cities. So, of course, traffic and the way we plan for cars and traffic has limited our cities and made them less safe, in a much more egregious way even than architects. Not only are cars themselves extremely dangerous and causing lots of violence and death, but the environments that they're creating are creating spaces where people don't feel safe to be in general. People don't feel safe crossing the street, but they definitely don't feel comfortable. And when you turn this upside down and you start planning for people and places, all of a sudden people can feel a lot safer and a lot more comfortable. And so we led a campaign in New York City to turn around our streets and to get the transportation commissioner fired that was planning for cars and traffic, and even Mike Bloomberg was all about more cars, more traffic equals more economic growth. And we convinced him to change that model, hire a new traffic commissioner, and do experiments. And we worked in neighborhoods throughout the city, not just in the wealthy parts of the city, to create public plazas and reinvent these districts around public destinations. So we think public spaces are the way to transform cities, the way to transform the perception of them is safe and welcoming and comfortable. One of our friends says that successful public spaces is the new anchor tenant. It's the fulcrum through which we can transform our cities. So we think cities should be focused around a place-led paradigm, place-led development, governance, financing, and that's very different from the way most cities are shaped. Most cities are still shaped in a very project-led approach. Let's build a facility, let's build a park, a road, let's police things. Discipline-led is let's get the best experts in to do these things a little better. Place-sensitive is to start being responsive to place, engage the community, work across disciplines a little bit. And I think Sweden's really good at this part of it. You're very, technically proficient. You're very, you're getting the best solutions from around the world and being responsive to communities. But we think the goal has to be place-led, where you're actually building the capacity of communities to improve their places themselves, to self-police, to self-manage, to self-program their public realm, just to not always to design it, but to develop the program with which they draw demand for good design. We think design is really important, and you should draw on the good design skills that are there. But when they lead, they limit the outcome. They limit the solution set that they're solving for. So how do we do this? How do we create a campaign in Sweden around placemaking? We work equally globally in most, pretty much every continent every year, and we're working on a continent-wide level, but also we have a European placemaking network that just met in Stockholm a couple months ago. I was just in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago, where we have a strong campaign going for the Netherlands, building from a global placemaking week we did last year from people from 48 countries. But at every scale, we see placemaking as a campaign that connects transforming places with building a network of people working together, with looking at systemic change goals. What are the biggest obstacles to placemaking? The cultural obstacles, organizational ones that need to be overcome to do this change. And so these campaigns can be at a place level, citywide, at a district level. The previous session was about business improvement districts and how they can lead these campaigns. And we've gotten to transform places in most contexts around the world. And have, there's great stories that have very community-led examples to be learned from. But we also work with the leaders of many different movements at a community level and all the way up to globally that are seeing how a focus on place, whether it's safety, sustainability, transportation, preservation, how focus on place brings together these causes, these different partners for more fundamental change and greater collaboration. But it's also movement building. Everything should be about building a network, building a movement, building energy, again, at every scale. And we have a global placemaking leadership council that's 2,000 people that are shaping the placemaking movement, that are convening locally and globally. Each continent has their network that are gathering to sort of shape what are the frontiers of placemaking. And a lot of them are looking at place governance and management as a key focus on that. And we could easily have a cross-cutting network of the people dealing with safety issues, the convergence of placemaking and safety as well. Some of the recent conferences and upcoming ones, there's one in China coming up, and so forth. And we did these Future of Places conferences in Stockholm. And placemaking is becoming a global movement, and it's a hashtag that's used pretty much equally in all around the world. Here's the Future of Places conferences were that Tigran Haas helped lead for the Axel Johnson Foundation. Convened 1,600 people from 100 countries, and 2 of the conferences were in Stockholm, one in Buenos Aires. One of the our board member Cecilia Martinez says is that we're creating a global movement to turn to shape spaces into places, to give purpose and meaning to space. So just space alone without reasons to be there, without meaning and purpose, isn't very safe necessarily. So just requiring open space and a large public realm, it doesn't ensure the success of it, and we think often threatens safety and security issues. A lot of the first projects we had were fixing spaces that simply were not places. They weren't safe places to be. Another key message, Tigran helped bring Saskia Sassen to these conferences, and she said that the city has long been complex but incomplete. And in that mix of complexity and incompleteness lies the possibility of those without power to make a history, to make a culture, to make an economy. So, fundamental to safety and security issues are often issues of division and inequity, and the feelings that people are not empowered to shape places or shape their economy and be part of it. And so we see placemaking is about challenging and empowering everyone to help shape their places and creating a more porous, open, flexible environment, and one that is more compatible with upward mobility and social integration. Looking at public markets and small ways that people feel like they can help not just shape the place but shape the economy as well. These ideas were further articulated in the Quito papers that Saskia Sassen did with Richard Sennett, Ricky Burdett, and Dr. Close, the executive director at the time of UN Habitat, that again really focused on the limiting factor for better cities is public spaces, and the fact that public spaces need to have more flexibility, more informality, and more public uses. And I think that is a challenge for cities in Sweden that are very livable, but sometimes you've become so livable that you lose some of the informality. And I think we talk about a lot of the best public spaces in the world are done through what we call a lighter, quicker, cheaper approach. And a lot of your best public spaces, a lot of the great waterfront places along the waterfront in Stockholm, or what we're seeing here, are done through a really lighter, quicker, cheaper approach. We don't always have to spend a lot of money on things. We don't always have to have it be very aesthetic and formal. It's the informality that can draw out and people, make them feel comfortable, create culture, preserve culture, and allow new cultures to feel comfortable coming into a place. So we say, Fran Tonkiss at this Future of Places conference said that cities are not built forms, they are social forms. We must design from social life, not just for it. So if we're designing for it, we're limiting it. We're not building its capacity. If we're drawing from it, we're growing it as well. And it's not always design that is the solution. So most planning is done through a very project-driven approach where you have the problem solution defined. It's crime or sustainability or equity, or we need more park space, or we need more lanes of for throughput or traffic. And you get public input after it's been defined. So it's usually the whole project's through one discipline or one department. And you can look at a community and see what projects came out of this. Even if they're exactly what the community needed, they don't become integrated into it and loved by a community. So we think placemaking turns the process sort of inside out, upside down, and you start with the place, identify the stakeholders, you evaluate the place. We have various engagement tools that facilitate this. It empowers communities. It's about being a facilitator to change, but most importantly, it's about building further capacity of the community to manage and program their public realm, to take responsibility for it, and often short-term, low-cost improvements that can be done. So just quick example is the city we've actually worked the most in is Detroit, a city formerly defined by crime and fear, and we've gotten to work in many contexts around the city, but 100 years ago it was actually a very safe, very vibrant, economically successful city. At the turn of in 2000, this is what the same place looked like. This is the same monument, and so with every failed economic development approach, they took the life out of the city and allowed traffic to go through. They said they wanted a destination to drive to, not through. For $20 million, they built this. We did the vision for it, and this is what it's like in the winter. It attracted billions of dollars investment in the blocks around it, including Dan Gilbert, who's a developer that we've worked with to do more iterations of it over the recent years. More lighter, quicker, cheaper improvements. We put a beach right at the center. This is what it was like, after this initial project, and then we did this photo simulation to improve it. We implemented that within a few months. When the month that Detroit declared bankruptcy, we put this beach right at the center of it. And again, in the winter time. And so this beach is this very informal, very inexpensive place that brings lots of people together and has given people connection and ownership to the center of their city again. And it's because it works at this place level, this idea that there's 10 reasons to be in there at least, that really grounds people, connects people, slows them down enough to create affection again for the center of their city. And so it looks like this, but on a regular basis. It's an ongoing party, in a sense, and a lot of these things are very temporary materials, just like what you have here, with markets that incubate small businesses that wouldn't be able to go into bigger ones in the space. We also apply these principles in one of the poorest parts of Detroit. A lot of Detroit is mostly bombed out blocks. So we looked at where are the assets. This is the last remaining grocery store in this neighborhood. Across the street from it was an abandoned gas station where these people were perceived to be loiterers by the people in the gas station, or in the grocery store rather. So we engaged all the people that were left in this neighborhood about how to create a node of activity in this space. Did some workshops, but more importantly, we had a party in the street, sort of like this, and asked people what it was sort of a temporary demonstration of how the space could be improved, but it was a way to engage them further, in front of the grocery store and in the space. And through that, they developed their vision for the blocks through a lot of short-term changes, and we got them a grant to implement it and design it. But again, nothing too fancy. And the people that were perceived to be loiterers built this the space in front of the abandoned gas station where they would no longer feel like they're loiterers or be perceived to be loiterers. Because not only did they help build it, but it gives them integrity and a sense of purpose and meaning in that space. So, but again, nothing too fancy or expensive. So, we're seeing this evolution of development, for safety, but all kinds of causes. From project-led to place-led, and as we move through that evolution, we're seeing a little bit of a devolution of government to allowing communities to actually lead and take ownership over their space. It's not that we like government, and government's doing a good job, but we need to facilitate many different sectors to take ownership over this. So the role of government becomes more of a facilitator, a capacity builder for change, not just a deliverer of projects. And it moves from measuring the success of each department around their separate goals of safety, events, design, economic development to shared value in the public realm, to place capital is what we call it. So this shared value becomes a way to continually have this conversation, allow new people to come into it, prevent any one discipline or sector from dominating, and reinventing the role of government and relationship of government to communities. So I think we can reinvent the relationship of the police officers to communities, and to be as facilitators of community safety as well. But it can be about not just addressing safety through that one solution set or one department, but through proactively adding positive activity and bringing in other people to help improve and take ownership over and self-police public spaces as well. So I'm gonna stop there, and then we're gonna hear from some other folks and be able to have more of a conversation at the end. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ethan. I think that is a good run-up for the next conversation with our actors. So please come up, Kristina, Linda, and Viktoria. we just take it all together there. Let me check. If we have all heard how this placemaking works now, can you shortly, you might introduce yourself a bit and tell where you work and what you're doing, but can you then also tell shortly about how do you personally work, or how does your company or organization work with placemaking in projects? Yeah.
Shall I use this? Okay. I'm from ICA Fastigheter. I'm a business developer, kind of head of architecture and city planning for real estate property. And everybody in here know ICA? Yeah, it's and we from the property company. It's one of Sweden's biggest. We are the biggest Swedish retail property company, and we mainly produce our places for a convenience store, which is like the biggest one in Sweden. I think, and we are 100 years old, and we have changed our mindset from building modernist box buildings and places, like in the middle of a field, to create a more vivid city, and really start to work with city planning. And we work, for example, with research. We have done an academic paper together with Quattro Porte, which we will present at a lecture tomorrow at Business Arena, 9:45. That's really interesting because it says much as you told us about placemaking. We're working with Handbook of Architecture, including lighting design and landscape design. We do placemaking projects, work together with famous artists and architects. We work with sculptures instead of bollards to make places more safe and secure. We do ecosystem services and do a placemaking analysis on all our projects that we do in Sweden. And for the moment we have nearly 200 places, things all over Sweden. So it's a lot to do, and we work really intense because we feel this is so important for the company's survival. And of course we work with Tryggare Sverige and the crime prevention theories we bring into our workshops, into our architectural and landscaping work. Yeah, that's shortly.
Good, then we continue there.
Hello, Linda Santesson. I'm an architect and works at Link Architecture, eller Link Arkitektur. Most of you are Swedish here, I guess. And we have come across this placemaking methodology, I think, or method, partly through our cooperation with Tryggare Sverige, or Safer Sweden, I've heard you call yourself now. And but for me personally, it actually started when I did my thesis at the university, when I read Jane Jacobs' Life and Death of Great American Cities, I think it's called, and started to investigate how some city centers or cores in cities can be either sort of destroyed or actually made into vibrant places while working either deliberately with the knowledge of this placemaking method, or if you don't really know what you're doing, you can actually destroy a whole city center while you actually think that you make it safe by putting up cameras and closing gates and so on at night. I don't know if we should show any pictures here, but we have one completed project in Link, which is actually a Norwegian project, harbor area close to Oslo city center. That's called Aker Brygge, or Åker Brygga in Swedish, and where our landscape architects have worked very close to this method, creating a place that has its own identity, that is really, really safe even at nighttime, and has also been a destiny for people in the city center. I think I'll stop there and continue later.
Hello, hi, I'm Viktoria Walden at White Architects. I am a social anthropologist. I've been working at White for about 10 years soon with social aspects in urban planning and architecture. They call it social sustainability as well, but it can be difficult sometimes to understand exactly what that is. I'm really happy to work there and happy to work with architects, but usually the methods that we use is observation, interviews, trying to get people engaged, and mostly that kind of information will end up in someone's drawer somewhere and no one will ever read it. Working with architects and urban planner, it actually becomes something physical, which is really, really lovely. And I actually ran into PPS working also in Nairobi with UN Habitat, and I got really excited because I thought, oh, there's a company that do what we do, but they have names for it. They call it placemaking, and in some way, that's how we work. Of course, we do a lot of buildings. We have an extra passion, I think, my group that work with this, for public buildings and public places, because that's when you can really involve and consult people. But we don't call it safety planning. We've been talking about this word safety. We have instead come to use a term that we call norm creative, because when you start to think feminist or norm creative, that is planning for the group of people in the public environment that don't feel as they not only safe, as that they can take it over. Like, this is my park, this is my place. You all of a sudden are planning for women and children. So planning norm creative is a way of actually making safe placemaking.
Great. Maybe that's also something to spin further on, actually. You were talking also about, public places is the place where we can involve people most. Is it actually just in public space that you can apply placemaking, or can it also be in shopping malls, in private areas?
I think you can do it, definitely. We've done it in public houses, like culture houses, schools, all kind of learning environments, because then you get to work with environmental psychology and really talk to the youths about what kind of spaces makes them want to stay at school longer or even actually study more. So but the limitation is that you can't really build something up. It will become a more architectural drawing. But when you work with public spaces, you can do pop-up parks, temporary parks, these examples, and also try out a lot in cheap materials that you can realize later on.
Ethan can come in later maybe, or right now, if you have some of these examples.
No, I can. Yeah.
You can take it later, maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
We own shopping centers and commercial spaces mainly, and of course you can apply placemaking, but it's important to remember that every space has to be programmed. And we have also a problem in Sweden with this modernist mindset. That we don't really, I'm sorry to say that, but we don't really have so much good architects in Sweden, because everybody has this modernist mindset. It has to look cheap, it has to look boring. And I mean, as a real estate property company, if Tesla and Apple can make wonderful products for people, why can't we do it? We have to take the customer's mindset, have to look at what people think, and look past the modernist mindset. We try to work with that. So we try to, in that, even change our organization. We have to work in different ways. We have to work more creative, and because good design doesn't have to be expensive. If you just listen to people and start in that instead of start where we usually do in the real estate business.
This needs a quick response from the
I
bad
know,
architects here. Which
I
button
think I
would you
need
press?
to so should I press this one? No. No, I don't think we have evil, bad, and lousy architects in Sweden. But I think one interesting thing that Ethan showed here is that the kind of pop-up architecture, or the mindset that it doesn't have to be expensive all the time. And I think maybe that's something that architects could perhaps dwell on for a while. And I think personally that if you have a good basis, if you spend your money on a good basis that is sort of going to last for a long time and still be flexible, you can experiment with a lot of cheap things that are sort of creative, and you can also try them out to see what actually works. Because that's one thing I also think that Sweden would benefit from trying more, to actually test things first. We are quite good at, making really, really nice places, even though you don't think so. But then we kind of leave them. We think that this is a good solution, and let's hope that it works. Instead of actually being there, changing it after a while, evaluating, adding new functions and so on. And if we don't spend all our money in the first attempt, we have some money left to actually manage it and to change it.
Maybe Ethan, because also,
I have
quickly.
to support my architect colleagues. No, I can. The thing with quality, that's absolutely correct. We're very quality driven, but really, it's up to the client. We've been trying to do a lot of things, and usually somehow someone's going to pay for it, and those are not the most creative ones. But if you at ICA took one of your shopping malls and say, "Hey, this is the money, go nuts," you'll see some results.
That's the problem for us, because if we find architects that are more skilled in economy, construction, and asset management, we would do that. But I think Swedish architects has to change the mindset, and also because I believe in much more power of the architect. We don't have that in Sweden. We have that in other countries. When I was in New York and saw some of the places where they had done great placemaking, they had some of the world's greatest architects, and it wasn't only pop-up things. They had created places that would be great for like 500 years, and the best places in the world, they are made by great architects, and they have been like great for 1,000 years. So it's not about to just make happenings, because it takes a lot of energy from the asset management. You have to build architects not as design. You have to build it like proportion, human scale, light, materials, and everything, so the quality really lasts. And I think that's a little problem. We have difficulties to see past modernism, past only the functional places.
How do you look at this, Ethan? Because you were talking about that placemaking is a ground root process starting up from the local people, and I don't know if it was this or the previous one. You were talking about we still need a designer part, the professionals, but maybe you can elaborate on this.
This is a really exciting tension, I think, in conversation, and in our sort of framing is to come at it through place. You draw on the best of these different solutions, and you get. Because I do think when it's just making buildings a little more sensitive to these issues, we don't quite get there. We don't quite draw on the skills and creativity of I do think probably the best designers in the world are in Sweden, but asking them to simply design a better building isn't enough. Asking a broader range of the population and the community to create a great place and to draw on architects is going to create more demand for good architecture and more creativity from them. Leading with the program, and I think leading with the social norm idea. I love this idea of, of really raising up what a place can be, and then figuring out and having that defined by a community about how they'd like to behave there, and they'd like to attract other people to add to that behavior. That starts to create this additive environment where everyone's competing to contribute to the shared value of that place, and the architects as well. And I think you start to design very differently. You start to design in a way that's not about the building or being defensive, and defensive is a design style, but also defensive from a safety and security issue. You start to design for more informality to allow the life to emerge and to be less about the form, or the aesthetic, and less and more about fun and informality, which ultimately is the way to create a safer, more open environment that's more inclusive for children, women, elderly, migrant cultures, and so forth. But so leading with place turns this upside down, and I think makes the conversation more constructive, allows the debates to happen, these tensions to emerge in a more additive way. It's a little scary for disciplines to sort of let go of that control a little bit. It seems like there's chaos, but I assure you that we have these tools that make it actually very constructive and simple and focused, and focusing on some short-term, low-cost things that can be done right away, build that conversation and build the capacity of everyone to debate these things. And hopefully some things do go a little wrong, because the debate is useful. The tensions, the conflicts are in the right process, are very creative and useful and build more capacity as well.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. It is sometimes it comes to this debate to design safe places or to let it go or let it be open for the public. But Jane Jacobs versus defensible space, the debate. But these quick, cheap solutions, it also, I guess, it also depends on the planning process. If the planning process allows for this kind of quick solutions, you were talking about the project finished within a few months. I don't know if that's going to happen here in Sweden. If we can make such quick processes.
Well, you put on this festival.
Yeah, but this is planned for years, and they start to plan for the next year right now.
A question about the quick process. If we still can keep the quick process and make a better result. That's what I was mentioning before about change our organizations. For example, all our projects, and as I mentioned, we have 200 places all in Sweden, and of course it's hard to change the mindset. It's hard to. We have a placemaking compass where we work with cultural context, art, landscaping, architecture, historical layers, everything that is placemaking. This is a placemaking model, and it's really difficult to change people's minds and also the minds of the architects and to see the whole picture. But you can still do it more. You get a bigger impact from the projects. You can get a better result with working easier and shorter time if you change the organizations, both architects and landlords.
I think they're cheering for placemaking, right? Is that,
Definitely.
No, but I think it's interesting what you're saying, because I heard that a lot from other builder and clients, that they say that they had wished that the architect would take more responsibility when it comes to economy and such, and actually project manage there's some kind of trust issue. They said before the 60s they used to be good at this, but now they're only designing and they don't have, and it's not, I don't know if it's completely true, but it's an idea that I hear so often that it must be some true in it. But I'm thinking, because I thought about this, and I thought about what you're doing with placemaking in PPS, and if we want to create a model for safer cities, I think that lately some of my colleagues we're in a group, we're economists, culture geographists, we're other stuff, basically trained in seeing the whole process of a society. We've been taking on the role of actually being process leaders together with the client's project leaders to actually make sure that sustainability is following the project through. Now, and I think when I'm thinking of, and I think this is actually correct, we should do more process leading from the beginning to the end. And I think in a way that's what PPS are doing, right?
Yeah, we're trying to support local people to be the process leaders and build the management of spaces through that process as well. So, I mean, we think, I think process and management have been left out. We're focusing too much on the product. It's not that the product gets better, they get through that effort, but it's often more affordable, quicker to do it through that approach, I think.
We are out of our time actually, but I will take Tigran up here, and then yes, exactly, and then we take one last round, just to round up. How do we take this US brand placemaking, you can say so, down to earth in Sweden actually?
I always say if you can steal a car in 60 seconds, you can say something also, right? Your question was at the beginning, what does research say? I would like to say one of the important things that Ethan took up here, that the place-making approach is really a tool for place-making, not for place design. So that's a great complementary element to a conventional planning process, which doesn't have it. So I think this is supposed to become almost a norm in any kind of a process we have. So that's the key thing. Another thing is, which I said in Swedish in the last session, was that it includes strategic placemaking, it includes creative placemaking, and also tactical one. So you guys go from a very small, limited micro changes to strategic ones where you look at socioeconomic transformations. So I think that's great. The three things maybe one should keep in mind that are maybe to think about is contextualizing contextual expertise, engagement, and representation. When you do these exercises, which part of the community is represented, who is engaged, which will reflect at the end sort of this result. And finally, aside from the norm creative one, I have something which is called cultural urbanism. And that's reflecting local culture and encouraging social interface. Kind of like that too. So I think that's what placemaking does in many ways. And I'm not going to get into the debate about architecture in Sweden. I'll leave that.
Great.
So 60 seconds.
Super. Is there one question from the public here? A short one? Or is everybody eager to watch the match? Okay, then if everybody's done, then I think we round up this session and we cheer for Sweden to win the game. Thank you very much.